about another minute and then we'll start.
Sure thing. Jim, did you have time to play around with the build this weekend?
No, it's too busy.
No worries.
I was supposed to link to. Okay, I think we can probably start. So welcome to the IPFS weekly call. My name's Jim Pick, and our guest today is Shokunin, and he's going to be talking about permaweb.io. So I'll hand it over to Shokunin.
Brilliant. Good morning. I guess a good place to start. I mean, a lot of people were not at IPFS camp and did not know about what we covered there, and I think a lot of things have been achieved since I was there. So I'm just gonna start from kind of scratch and get people updated on that. Feel free to also interrupt me with questions and anything. Best place to start is really just go on permaweb.io, which I just updated tonight at 2 a.m. May not be related to my sore throat. So
is it possible for you to share a screen or something? So
yes, of course. We're gonna pray to the Zoom gods, but let's see. Start video. No. Share. Yes. And then this guy. Boom. Look at that. Does it work?
Yeah, we can see it.
Brilliant. Okay, so permaweb.io is actually a collection of efforts. It's really a realization that us, our team as product people, we want to have a way to introduce the concepts of the permaweb, of the decentralized web, of IPFS, etc., to the mainstream, and to learn the general concepts behind the technology, learn what apps are out there, and how to get started with this whole thing. So we've been working on a variety of apps, but we realized that there's a lot of core questions that people have that we all run into, and the textile team runs into all the time. So we decided to start with a portal, permaweb.io. Surprisingly, it was free. And try to explain the philosophy we have here. This whole thing stems from the idea that we want to take back the internet from the top 10 giants, the 90% of websites that control, the 10 websites that control 90% of the internet, and make it possible using IPFS to start self-hosting the things. So what you see on this page is we're going for a very basic like app store type of feel of like, this is kind of like the cards you should care about when you're approaching this space. So we're starting with some basic concepts to explain to people what this stuff is. We're going to be populating it with more tutorials, both from the technology side of like, this is how you get started with IPFS, this is how you build a basic page and deploy it, as well as blog posts, articles, the meetup meetings coming up, and the apps that we're working on. I've been working on an app called PermaWeb Writer, which I'll show you in a second. Of course, we're super close to the textile team. Since we're product people, we don't do a lot of backend work. We basically consider textile our backend team because they really help us build on top of IPFS super easily. So we think the two most mature kind of things in terms of consumer stuff on IPFS at the moment are PermaWeb Writer and textile photos, but we're looking for others to add here. And so essentially this is just a community space for us to showcase all things IPFS and related to get people in the community faster. That's why we have all the chats, and that's why we've been also working on providing chat bridges for the whole community so that our Discord server, the Matrix server, and the IRC servers are bridged. So that's the basics of permaweb.io. I'd love to know if you have some questions so far.
So the the Discord chat bridge, and
Uh-huh.
is that um, you didn't do the Matrix one, did you? This is a separate chat thing?
So Matrix has a native bridge to Freenode, the IRC server where protocol channels are. However, there is no Matrix to Discord or Discord to IRC native bridge. So we put them all together. Now we have a server that handles that basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Obviously, visual is not final. We're working on that, but I'd love to follow up with people in the community here to keep updating this site regularly, so it becomes a space where we like have a regular newsletter and try to get people who are rather not technical into this space and to start testing the apps that we have and bring them to the events that we have and all that. The second thing I'll show you is what I was showing at IPFS camp and some progress since. Which is the work on PermaWeb Writer. So this I just covered briefly earlier, but really the entirety of the internet since Web 2.0. If like I don't know how many of you guys were around for like building startups around 2005, but I think the big like the novelty at the time was that like we were switching to a service-based internet, right? Like APIs were becoming the standard and all that. And that really gave birth to this kind of generalized services that were specialized in a certain kind of need. Be like, oh, I'm your social network, your video platform, your photo site, whatever. And the problem I think we've seen the past 15 years is that these platforms have become basically the internet for people. So like prior to that, you know, the internet was like get a host, make your web page, like put your stuff on the internet that way. Like it was this very indie kind of web. And that has mostly gone away. People still do it. They go on Squarespace and they do a thing, GoDaddy or whatever, but it's not the norm at all. And without even playing the Big Brother angle or anything, I think in terms of culture and diversity, it's fairly shit. Because it's basically a like gentrification of the internet. And I think that's really sad. Like there needs to be more diversity in here. I also think that if you look at the technology of IPFS, it's actually a really good match for free speech and this kind of expression of indie people. Because a lot of people in the community see it as various other things, which it is. You know, it's a great tool for better infrastructure. It's a great way of thinking of different shape of the internet. All those things are true. But I don't think enough people hammer the kind of like free speech angle here, which is we are about self-hosting. Basically, by design, by nature, we're doing end-to-end encryption, which I know we don't get natively on IPFS, but with Textile we do, and a lot of people do on top of it by default anyway. And links can't essentially get censored, or if they do, you can still point at things, which is really, really great. So it goes back to, I think, the initial principles of the internet when it was DARPANET, where it's like, okay, we need to have this kind of like decentralized system of nodes that can talk to each other in a resilient way. And I really like that. That's something that IPFS brings back to the internet. So we're thinking about all that. And okay, so this is what I showed at IPFS camp. I'm going to skip that actually, but just to tell you what the app we're doing is, we're thinking that it's too difficult to just write text and put it on IPFS. And I know PeerPad exists. It's great. CryptoPad or CryptPad, I never remember, exists as well. And they're fine tools. I think they're very techy in some ways. And so we're just looking at, like, from product angle, how can we do something a little bit different and all that. So we've been working a lot with the Textile team to make a new tool. We focus on things that you would find more on like Medium. So like things like embeds and putting emojis and reactions and things like that. So that you can write more like a blog post or a Medium type of post and not so much like a Google Docs kind of document. But I'd like to show you the stuff we've been working on since IPFS camp, because actually it was really interesting having the discussions there, realizing that people were like, oh, we want to collaborate a different way on IPFS. Was kind of like the common point in a lot of discussions we had with people. And so we went back to the drawing board of like, what's the the core of interactions we want to solve for. And like writing is great, but we realized that teams wanted essentially really a Dropbox paper replacement for IPFS. That's what came across from the discussions. So we went ahead and designed that. So here on the screen, you see the current work in progress version, where essentially you have a bunch of teams/channels on the left that have different sets of permissions. So you can have, it's essentially like repos on GitHub. You can have them private, you can have them for team and assigned to specific people. You can also make them public. And in there, you can start creating discussions. That can be a single post or that can be a series of posts. So like philosophically, it's kind of a place between, let's say, Slack and Gmail. I hate Slack with a passion. I think it's a garbage tool and it's a negative value on mankind. I think it's very distracting and it's always on you all the time. But it's also really easy to use. And I think Gmail makes it really, really convenient to like come back to things later and all that. So that's why we went, like, I think collaboration should feel a bit like a mixture of the two. So how it works is really simple. You just start writing, just like I showed you earlier. You can just type away the same way you would on Medium. The only thing we added since IPFS Camp is the ability to pick a team that you're sharing with and the specific people you want to. You can end up with posts like this, which we don't have the reactions right now, but I'm hoping by the end of the month we do. But essentially, it's sort of blog posts, sort of to-do lists, documents, similar to kind of documents you would do on Dropbox paper, basically. We're thinking of the kind of reactions people wanted. We had a bunch of back and forths with the textile team on the kind of meetings they do and how they react to each other. And so we're like, okay, you guys clearly want something kind of like the Facebook reactions to a post, you know, laugh and cry and all that stuff. But they need to be about work. So we kind of landed that these reactions of approve, disagree, and is thinking. But that's also subject to change depending how people want to interact. We'll play around with that. Here you can see that threads are actually a series of messages. So you can write another post below or replies and comments, etc., and tag people and branch conversation that way. So we want to feel a bit like the back and forth you can have on GitHub. That's a more thorough example of discussion with people. The rest of what I showed at IPFS Camp. We want to feel like something you're already used to, meaning that's why we have a focus on having a lot of keyboard shortcuts exactly the same as Gmail, and providing a what you see, what you get editor that you can just write plain text or have markdown the same way as you would on Medium. But we also want to leverage what IPFS gives us for free, things like full-on versioning of every character you type, and the ability to just go back in time with all the past versions, which is something that if you want to do that on Gmail or Dropbox paper or whatever, it's like a bit more painful. And one thing we're very interested in doing is so this whole project's open source. It's MIT. We're not looking at becoming richer on this project. We're looking at creating a way for people to put more things on IPFS. And because of that, we're very interested in pushing things out from the editor. I think when you look at a tool like Notion, for example, which a lot of startups love, Notion's great, but it does a lot of things and tries to get you to switch to a lot of things. And in that logic, basically, like the design philosophy is that you pull things in the tool. I want to do exactly the opposite with this tool, which is that if you write a thing here, you can publish it on your website. So that you can treat your website, or you can treat this tool as a headless CMS for your website and just pull the latest post and essentially start writing a blog dynamically on top of IPFS, which is something that people are not really doing at the moment, sadly. So the relationship would be to have basically a static page on IPFS with a JS query that just go, what's the latest content you have on your textile node, and it would just show you the blog post. So we're very interested in like enabling people to push their content further than just being, very static pages on the internet. and kind of pushing the envelope on IPFS that way. And we think that there's going to be a very versatile kind of use set of people using for the paste bin and team collaboration and blogs and those kinds of things. I have no idea what kind of shape it's going to take, but it's going to be interesting in the coming months. And that's all I have. We're basically the first people trying to do this very consumer take on this whole stack. So if you meet me in person, either at upcoming conferences or the meetups that we have, we'll probably end up in a design discussion. This could be fairly different from a lot of people in the space, but we think the tech is really awesome for helping make the internet come to shape we think it should be, and we really like to bring more people to that. And that's it. Love to take your questions. Thank you, Volker. I saw the claps.
Feel free to either raise your hand or type the questions in the chat window. I have a question. You're using the textile stack.
Right.
How have you found that? Has that been used? You're obviously building everything on top of it, but
right. I thank God every day for their existence. I'm not even religious. No, it's great. And I say this, genuinely. We're super close to them because there's a few things. Let me go back to where we're at this, by the way. We have something else on the screen. So we met them last year at Lab Day, actually, funnily enough. And Y introduced us, and he was like, you should talk with these guys. Sounds like you've got the same philosophy about what the internet should be. I'm like, oh, okay. And started talking with them, and we thought they'd be these backend engineer dudes. And it was like, oh no, you come from Apple, and you've got all these design sensitivities we have and everything, and provide all these tools for people. And we realized we're trying to build the exact same things. We were talking about building an iCloud on top of IPFS and giving people a personal Dropbox and what became essentially a Dropbox paper here for IPFS. But their skill set is very much on the tool side of the stack. They're the way I explain to people how we think of the product stack on IPFS is that IPFS is very much the kind of protocol backend, very low level backend tool. Textile for us is something like jQuery or some sort of library like that to just make my life easier to dev on top of, Material UI or something. And then we just build front end on top of it with the methods they give us. So it makes it super easy for product people to work with, and I think that's been very, very helpful for us. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because we're heavily in dogfooding each other's techs. So we're talking essentially daily, roadmaps on how we're gonna build the things and all that, testing our stuff all the time. It's been super helpful.
Okay, we have a question from the chat. Dietrich's asking, how stable and ready to use is Opponent Writer today?
I see it now. How stable and easy to and ready to use? It is stable and easy to use and ready to use if you are technical, which, Dietrich, I know you are. So right now, it requires you to get a release from GitHub/permaweb, permaweb.js. So you get a release there and you run that and you're able to use it. All you need as a dependency basically is, besides the yarn install dependencies, is that you need a textile wallet to run, so a textile node. So you download Go Textile, you run that, and you're able to use the app. Obviously, we're working on eliminating that. That's actually the top priority right now for the textile team, and we're the first project that's going to have that. So we're going to make it that in our builds, we're going to include a textile node, and it's going to detect if you have a node running or not. And if you don't, then it will run it. If not, then it will, use the current node. And so I'm hoping that in a sprint or two, we have that ready and people can just double click and start using it. The editor itself works really well. As of today, you can put emoji and embed things and toggle bold and H3 and whatever and all that properly, and it works great. So these things work. The links work, except they give you JSON right now, but you can use them for everything. So that's kind of their point right now. We do not have any collaboration features yet. So that's going to be ready once Texta has done a lot of changes to their permissions and role system, which I've actually helped design. And that's going to be in the coming weeks. Carson's working on that. So we're kind of waiting to see how that becomes available. The name from Epona writer to perma-web writer. We love the name Epona. It's okay. So those of you who are not video gamers, they won't get the joke right away. Those of you who are and who are fans of Legend of Zelda, we came up to the name Epona because in Zelda the hero is called Link, and we're like IPFS is all about saving links all the time. Epona is the horse that's always there to save you and doesn't ever die, so that's what we called everything, names around Zelda. The problem is there's not enough Zelda fans out there and they never remember the name, so we called it PermaWeb instead. It's a lot easier.
We need more questions.
Yes, we can fix the Zelda fans. I agree with that. I do think there's actually a really good match between emulation and IPFS, which I'm surprised no one's dabbled with yet, because ROM sets are actually very static files. Like everyone's like got these like known good ROM sets that it's just, we know exactly what's the CRC for everything. I'm pretty sure people would have put those on IPFS, but I'm surprised no one's combined like a JavaScript version of emulators and those external links. Then you'd get like, some permanent archive thing.
So Molly had a hand to ask a question, and then Dirk has a
yes.
So
my question is the same as Dirk. My Dirk is the same as question, which is kind of, especially coming from like a building on top of things more from a front end perspective. Like, what are your pain points, and especially like what communication pathways work really well for you and which ones maybe don't work as well for you, given the way you interface with IPFS.
Okay, there's a lot of different challenges. I'll start with the non-dev ones actually, because they're the least obvious ones. Because if I went speed, like you already know that it's not that important. The whole concept of the decentralized web right now is tarnished by a couple really bad things. One is people associate it with dark web, like straight up. They just think it's like, oh, so you guys are doing something to share like really bad photos, or like doing shopping of like bad stuff online or whatever. Like, why would you do these things? There is no communication around that. There is no common message around that. There is, it's the standard like, what do you have something to hide kind of problem. And I think we need to do better. That's why I started permaweb.io actually as a portal, to start educating people on that. It's really tough, especially when so much of our communication is about tooling. It's like, hey guys, you can decentralize nodes and run them. And it's like, it sounds like Bitcoin to people and stuff. And they're like, oh, maybe it's a scam, it's dodgy. Like that makes it really, really difficult. Like when there is no clear value proposition for like average people. It's just hard to sell them on the thing. The second thing is, I'd say, diving deeper on the kind of like technology focus. There's a real asymmetry between what's possible with IPFS and what people claim is possible with IPFS. Right, like practically, I can IPFS add dot and like have my stuff and get a hash and put it out there. And if I can run a node, I can serve that stuff to people. Cool. But a lot of people don't have a server to run these things. A lot of people don't even know you need that. They just think that you pin the thing and then, or you generate your hash and then you're done. They don't know that they think it's some sort of like cloud storage solution kind of thing and all that. They think that you can send data to space that's designed to send stuff to Mars. They think like all the interplanetary stuff. They think that's designed to like replace HTTP, and that's like what you're gonna be able to do with that. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but the reality is, that I can IPFS add, and I can get a hatch, and I can maybe host a website. Like permaweb.io is hosted on IPFS, and we're actually very happy with the speed. But there's a lot of unmet kind of expectations from like there's these early adopters in the community who just don't seem to understand what the state and the reality of the technology is right now. So the same challenge that you see, I think, in crypto. So that's from the non-technical aspects. From the technical aspects, I'd say we sort of had to give up on building on top of IPFS ourselves as product people, because the stack was so challenging. There is no notion of user. There's no notion of like logging in and session and permissions and roles and who can do stuff. PubSub was really iffy. There's no native encryption. So all these things make it if I want to have a product that's like aimed at more than one person, or has some privacy aspect to it or anything, all these things we had to build by hand. And, community is very knowledgeable about this stuff and all that, but it makes it that there's this really hard wall of skills that's needed to solve. And so like, we can't do that. And so thankfully we found Textile that, they saw at least a chunk of that problem and started solving it, which I really appreciate. Because that's really enabling us to do our thing.
Okay, I'm just watching the time, and
yes.
I think we better cut it off here because people have to go to meetings and things.
No worries.
But thanks for coming, and that was a really great perspective I think you have, and we're excited. I think everybody who's excited to see how PermaWeb Writer is. I think you can actually download it today for, I guess, like Windows,
Linux, and Mac. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can make your own build also and just run it off your browser without having executable. So that works too. And you just need a Textile wallet.
Okay, this is great, and we'd love to have you back sometime in maybe a few months and see how
for sure
goes. And
for sure. And if you want to join the community, well, we have the link on permaweb.io, but it's really permaweb/Discord. And you can join. We bridge every single channel from Proco Labs and the whole decentralized web community. So it's really easy to talk with everyone there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I'll have a look, David. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.